the grand conclave of unblinking light, a structure carved from the heart of a dead moon orbiting the Krillithos' homeworld, pulsed with a low, resonant thrumming that was less sound and more a deep seismic acknowledgement of the surrounding galactic crisis. Within the central ocular chamber, a space vast enough to contain the atmospheres of a dozen smaller worlds, the strategos Xylos stood upon the central platform of crystallized iron, his triple-jointed limbs trembling minutely, a movement that betrayed the severe anxiety gripping the highest echelon of the galactic power structure. Around him, the elected and inherited representatives of the ethos sat silent in their tiered rings, their multifaceted optical clusters focused on the shifting projections of the tactical display, a map that bled crimson along the northern frontiers, marking the relentless advance of the Cathar hegemony. But the crimson was not the source of Xylos' agitation. It was the unpredictable, utterly alien emerald flickers that appeared and vanished between the established battle lines. "We have exhausted the established protocols," Xylos articulated, his voice modulated by the chamber's vast acoustics, sounding like the grinding of tectonic plates. "The Cathar advance, while relentless, adheres to patterns of entropy and predictability that are familiar. We can mathematically calculate the exact moment of our logistical collapse based upon their current vector and energy consumption. That is acceptable. We understand collapse. What we do not understand, and what fundamentally compromises our defensive strategy, is the presence of the anomalous entity designated Phantom of Sol, the designation provided by the fringe research teams who first encountered its signature in the void beyond the veil of Cygnus. A long silence settled, heavy with the weight of civilizations that had endured for uncounted millennia. The Krillithos valued structure, continuity, and predictability above all else, having survived previous dark ages by adhering rigidly to established physical laws and social constructs. The human factor, this phantom, represented pure chaos dressed in the guise of ultimate effectiveness. Counselor Vec, whose lineage controlled the entirety of the outer defense fleets, extended a chitinous appendage signaling descent. Vec was ancient, a pillar of conservative thought, his loyalty absolute but his flexibility non-existent. "Strategos Xylos, you speak of an anomaly as if it were a tactical asset," Vec's voice crackled, laced with disapproval. "We have seen the recorded data. The vessel or vessels, for we cannot confirm the structural integrity or quantity of the presence, exhibited velocity signatures exceeding the theoretical limits of known warp technology. It achieved total signature suppression immediately prior to kinetic deployment. It breached the Cathar forward defense screen, a screen built upon the finest energy-shielding physics developed over 12,000 cycles, and executed surgical strikes against critical command nodes and logistical nexuses, causing cascading failure, then vanished. No residual wake, no thermal signature, no gravitational distortion consistent with rapid acceleration or deceleration. It is not an asset, it is a statistical impossibility. It defies causality. We do not ally with contradictions, we quarantine them." Xylos rotated slowly on the platform, allowing his gaze to sweep across the council, noting the subtle agreement reflected in the optical facets of the assembled peers. Their fear was palpable, rooted not in the potential destructive power of the humans, for the Krillithos possessed armaments capable of planetary sterilization, but in the total intellectual defeat represented by their methodology. If an entity could violate the known constants of the universe, what other terrible truths might it hold? "The ghost in the storm," the Cathar themselves had named it in their intercepted communications, a reference to its terrifying ability to appear only when the battle raged most fiercely, disappearing before the echo of the destruction subsided. "Counselor Vec's assessment of the physics is accurate, based on the established corpus of Krill science," Xylos conceded, the formality of the language essential to maintaining political equilibrium. However, the political and strategic necessity transcends academic terror. The Cathar advance was stalled, fundamentally, for 3 solar rotations following the event at the Cygnus Veil. Their command structure was so deeply compromised, their logistical nodes so precisely targeted, that their entire second wave collapsed into operational confusion. This intervention provided us with a crucial window of opportunity, a window that our conventional forces were wholly incapable of opening, even with maximal deployment. He raised a hand, and the projection shifted. It displayed a complex, almost poetic rendering of the human engagement. T showed nothing physical, merely the effect's asterisk. A tight, spiraling ripple of destruction centered exactly on the Cathar operational center, like a needle driven through a massive, sprawling organism. The energy expenditure recorded for this feat was negligible, almost zero, leading to the designation of ghost by the fearful Krill analysts. They simply could not reconcile massive kinetic impact with zero observable propulsive energy. We sent multiple high-level diplomatic packets, Xylos continued, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial rumble. Formal requests for parley, offerings of shared technology, even pleas for intervention based on ethical symmetry, as they seem to have specifically avoided targeting civilian populations, a level of restraint entirely unknown to the Cathar. Every message has been confirmed as received, logged by their own systems which exhibit robust data retrieval capabilities. Yet we receive only silence. This silence, coupled with the precision of their destruction, suggests not philosophical indifference, but perhaps a radically different approach to communication or a profoundly alien set of priorities. We cannot afford the luxury of annihilation based on fear. We must attempt contact, utilizing unconventional vectors before the Cathar recover and assimilate the defensive lessons of the Cygnus Veil. The storm is upon us. The ghost may be our only harbor. A new voice entered the debate, softer, less practiced in the brutal political warfare of the conclave. It was Acolyte Scene, a young, designated cultural liaison who specialized in the analysis of emergent civilizations. Scene had been the first to synthesize the fragmented cultural data points associated with the entity's point of origin. The solar system designated Sol, a forgotten, resource-poor stellar nursery. Strategos, with the deference appropriate to your station, I must present the cultural synthesis, Scene stated, his smaller form illuminated by the intense, cold light of the chamber. The civilization from Sol, humanity, presents a profile of profound self-contradiction. Their recorded history is replete with internal violence and short-sighted ecological collapse, yet their philosophical and ethical output rivals the most stable core worlds of our ethos. They have documented historical periods marked by intense, self-destructive conflict, immediately followed by epochs of collaborative innovation that revolutionize conceptual physics within mere decades. They are simultaneously the most volatile and the most resilient species encountered in the galactic record. Scene paused, gathering the collective attention. Crucially, their history is defined by overcoming overwhelming odds through sheer conceptual leaps, often triggered by existential threats. The ghost methodology, the total suppression of conventional signatures, the surgical precision, the apparent indifference to standard diplomatic engagement. This is not malice or arrogance. Based on my analysis of their Cold War period and their early orbital defense doctrines, this is optimization asterisk. They are not hiding from us. They are demonstrating efficiency on a scale we deem impossible because our framework of action requires massive energy expenditure to prove capability. They are proving capability through the precise absence of expenditure. The concept hung in the air, efficiency as a form of menace. Vex scoffed, a dry, rattling sound. Optimization, they are silent killers who respect neither physics nor protocol. They respond to nothing. They are unknowable. The unknown must be excised. But they responded asterisk to the Cathar, Xylos interjected, cutting through the rising political heat. They intervened only when the Cathar posed a systemic threat to the entire frontier, not just to one species. They acted as a systemic stabilizer. They are not unknowable, counselor, merely unreadable by our current lexicon. We shall shift the vector of engagement. We will not use military vessels or formal diplomatic cruisers. We will utilize the asterisk harbinger of lore asterisk, a vessel designed for deep ethnographic observation, and send it to the location where the human presence is currently projected. The heart of the Ophiuchus cloud, a region so rife with gravitational and electromagnetic distortion that it has been termed the storm by every neighboring polity. If they are the ghost in the storm, we must meet them in the heart of their chaotic habitat. The transition from the orderly, cold grandeur of the conclave to the nauseating, turbulent environment of the Ophiuchus cloud was immediate and visceral. The harbinger of lore was an ancient vessel, designed to withstand deep void pressures, but even its stabilized hull groaned under the relentless electromagnetic violence of the nebula. It was an environment where stars were still being born and massive gravitational wells swallowed light, a churning celestial maelstrom. It was here amidst the chaos that the Krillithos sensor net had detected the subtlest, most sustained gravitational resonance associated with the phantom activities. Acolyte Scene, now designated the primary emissary, stabilized himself in the observation dome, his sensory organs overwhelmed by the visual and oral noise. The Krillithos technology required clear, structured input. This environment was sensory starvation and overload simultaneously. He realized why they were perceived as a ghost. Any conventional propulsion system operating here would be visible for light years due to the immense energy required to counter the distortions. Yet the human presence was marked only by the absence of this struggle. "Captain, refine the localized gravitational readings," Scene ordered, his voice tight. "Filter for harmonics inconsistent with natural decay fields. We seek the impossible quiet spot." The ship's AI processed the command with visible strain. Moments stretched into hours, marked only by the shuddering of the hull. Then, a single, unwavering point of stability appeared on the sensor readouts, a tiny, localized pocket of gravitational equilibrium against the tidal forces of the nebula. It was impossible. It required localized manipulation of spacetime on a monumental scale, utilizing physics the Krill had labeled theological speculation millennia ago. "We have achieved proximity," the captain reported, his voice tinged with reverent fear. "Gravitational stability point detected. Designation, Ethelred Station ***. Scene activated the visual spectrum lens, pushing the sensors past the chaotic interference. What they saw was not the bristling warship or the sleek, dangerous hunter they had imagined. It was a utilitarian structure, vast but not ornate, composed of dull, matte gray materials that absorbed rather than reflected light. It was essentially an immense, geometrically perfect scaffold holding specialized, complex instrumentation. There were no visible weapons emplacements, no obvious engine bells, and certainly no energy-shielding flares. It looked like an abandoned piece of infrastructure, impossibly placed. "Transmit contact protocol Gamma 3, Scene commanded. This protocol was stripped of all formal Krill hierarchy and focused purely on mathematical common ground. A repeating sequence of prime numbers followed by a rendering of the fundamental atomic weights of hydrogen and helium, a universal plea for mutual recognition. They waited. The chaotic energy of the nebula continued to roar around the asterisk Harbinger. After what felt like an eternity, precisely 18.3 standard Krill minutes, a response arrived. It was not a grand display of power, not an encrypted challenge, but a concise, text-based data burst, transmitted on a frequency so narrow and efficient that it defied detection by any non-specialized receiver. To the vessel identified as Harbinger of Lore, KRYLL Ethos Registry, your intentions have been logged and analyzed. This is not a warship. This is Habitat and Infrastructure Station AETHELRED. We acknowledge contact. We are aware of the political situation regarding the Cathar hegemony and your request for intervention. Please state the specific terms of your diplomatic request. We do not require further cultural salutations. The directness was astonishing, almost rude by Krill standards, which necessitated hours of formalized preamble and reciprocal acknowledgement of imperial stability before addressing the true matter. Scene felt a perverse sense of relief. The fear of the unknown was replaced by the anxiety of the truly professional. "They cut through 4 hours of formalized protocol in one burst," Scene muttered, shaking his optical clusters. "Prepare the delegation. I will board. The Krill must face the ghost on its own ground, the ground of stripped-down reality." The docking procedure was facilitated by the humans with clinical efficiency. The Harbinger's delicate maneuvering was guided not by tractor beams or magnetic locks, but by slight, perfectly timed gravitational pushes that corrected the turbulence of the storm. Scene and 2 security aides, marching rigidly in their ornate diplomatic armor, a symbol of Krill stability, passed through the airlock into *Ethelred Station. The interior was a study in minimalism and light. The atmosphere was clean, cool, and utterly silent, a silence only possible through total dampening of vibration and energy leakage. There were no flashing lights, no unnecessary conduits, no decorative filigree. Every surface was purely functional. The human waiting for them was designated Ambassador Lena Rostova. She was average in height for her species, wearing a simple, dark uniform, her posture relaxed but attentive. She did not carry weapons, nor was she flanked by any overt guards. Her face held an expression of calm intelligence and measured anticipation. To the Krill, who communicated rank and power through layers of complex signaling, armor weight, light spectrum reflection, P. Austere rigidity, this lack of external display was deeply unsettling. "Welcome, emissary Scene of the Krillithos," Rostova said, her voice clear and without inflection, speaking the Krill language fluently via synthetic assistance. "Thank you for navigating the Ophiuchus cloud. We understand this environment is taxing for conventional propulsion." Scene, slightly rattled by the immediate use of his name and rank without the customary inquiries into his lineage, forced himself into the rigid diplomatic stance. Ambassador Rostova, we thank you for receiving us. Your capacity to maintain such structural integrity and atmospheric stillness within this region is profound. It is simply applied physics, Rostova replied, offering a brief, almost imperceptible nod. We optimize for stability in high-entropy environments. But we understand you did not travel across the void to discuss structural engineering. You came concerning the Cathar hegemony and our previous localized intervention. Scene felt the internal heat rise. She spoke of the event that had terrified the galaxy, the systematic crippling of a vast enemy force, as if it were a simple technical adjustment. Indeed, Ambassador, the conclave of unblinking light requires clarity regarding your presence on our frontier. Your methodology, the speed, the suppression of energy signatures, the precision of impact, has been deemed by our analysts as defying established physics. Many fear you are operating outside the ethical bounds of intergalactic conflict, utilizing weapons of unacceptable nature, or perhaps are a reconnaissance force for a species even more powerful than the Cathar. Rostova listened patiently, her eyes maintaining steady contact. When Scene finished, the silence returned, thick and absolute. We understand the fear, Rostova stated finally. Fear is often generated by incomprehension, which is generated by a deficit of data or a reliance on outdated models. Let me address the concept of the ghost directly. The Krillithos, like the Cathar, utilizes systems that require immense measurable energy expenditure to achieve military goals. Gravitational propulsion, mass effect shielding, high-yield kinetic weapons. All these systems generate waste heat and detectable distortion fields. These are the signatures your fleets rely on to track and predict movement. She gestured toward a wall panel, which activated, displaying a holographic model of the Cygnus Veil engagement. Only this time, it showed the environment before the attack. Your analysis is correct that we did not utilize conventional warp or high-yield energy projection during that intervention, Rostova explained. Our objective was to neutralize the threat with minimal collateral damage and, crucially, minimal energy cost. The ghost methodology is not a weapon. It is an economic strategy implemented across four-dimensional space. We do not use conventional FTL drives for tactical maneuvers. We utilize localized temporal acceleration and microgravitic lensing to fold the local spacetime around the vessel, reducing the distance between points without exceeding the speed of light within the folded space. This requires specialized infrastructure, like this station, to calculate the necessary geometry in real time. This process, when executed correctly, generates virtually no residual thermal or kinetic wake. We simply sidestepped reality as you define it. Scene's internal processing system stuttered. The Krill had considered localized temporal manipulation theoretical, requiring energy input exceeding that of a young star. Yet Rostova described it as an economic strategy. The energy cost? Scene began, his voice barely a rasp. Your system must require unimaginable power output to sustain this level of localized curvature. Rostova's mouth curved into a faint, almost pitying smile. That is where the Krill model differs from the human model, emissary. You assume power must be generated. We assume power must be harvested and recycled asterisk. The Ophiuchus cloud is not a hostile environment to us. It is a repository of gravitational shear and stellar electromagnetic waste. We harvest the energy constantly shed by the storm, utilizing the localized gravitational distortions to refine and feed the temporal lensing array. We are, in effect, driving our vessels using the turbulence of the universe. When we execute a tactical maneuver, we are spending the universe's waste energy, not our own. Our signature suppression is not a technological cloak. It is simply the natural result of zero-waste operations. We are quiet because we are not loud. The realization struck Scene with the force of a high-yield kinetic impact. The humans weren't terrifying because they had superior weapons. They were terrifying because their physics were based on conservation, not consumption. They saw the chaos of the nebula not as an obstacle, but as a fuel source. The ghost was not an entity of dark power, but manifestation of total efficiency, a deep space sustainability model weaponized. And your strikes, Scene continued, striving to regain his composure. The precision targeting of command structures, avoiding population centers, is this intentional restraint or simply an operational limitation? It is ethical necessity rooted in philosophical stability, Rostova confirmed, her gaze hardening slightly. Humanity learned through centuries of internal conflict that the destruction of culture and population centers only guarantees generational retaliation and resource squandering. The Cathar hegemony is driven by its command structure and its logistical ability to project force. Remove the ability to coordinate and feed the conflict, and the conflict dissolves. We attack the function asterisk of war emissary, not the participants. Our intention was not to destroy the Cathar, but to force a systemic halt to their aggression toward the core of the galaxy. Scene felt a profound, tectonic shift in his understanding of power. The Krillithos had always measured strength by the ability to generate the greatest force. The humans measured strength by the ability to achieve the greatest effect with the least force. The Krillithos were shouting across the void. The humans were whispering with terrifying accuracy. Asterisk Scene returned to the conclave of unblinking light with a report that was met, initially, with outright disbelief and hostility. Counselor Vec demanded that Scene be placed in isolation, suggesting that the human technology included psychotropic conditioning to alter reality perception. Strategos Xylos, however, felt a cold, philosophical weight settle upon him. He had spent his life managing logistics and conventional force projection. Scene's report described a civilization that managed the very topology of existence as a logistical problem. Strategos, I urge immediate counterdeployment, Vec thundered, his energy output rising until the crystallized iron of the floor beneath him vibrated. Whether they utilize waste energy or fusion power, they possess the means to achieve tactical supremacy. Their presence is a risk, a variable we cannot tolerate. If they are so efficient, they could turn that efficiency against us with catastrophic speed. Xylos held up a hand, silencing the immediate political storm. We must recognize the truth, Counselor. The Cathar, recovering from the initial systemic shock, are reforming their assault vectors. They are adapting their command structure to operate in a more dispersed, decentralized formation. Our own analysis predicts that their full, unified assault will reach the Krill exclusion zone within 72 cycles. We do not have the operational capacity to defeat this wave conventionally. Our only option is to accept the human framework, however terrifying its efficiency might be. Xylos activated the diplomatic channel, overriding Vec's furious protests, directing the transmission at the asterisk Ethelred station at the heart of the Ophiuchus storm. Ambassador Rostova, Xylos began, his tone stripped of all political ornamentation, adopting the functional directness the humans seemed to prefer. The Krillithos, representing the unified council of unblinking light, acknowledges the findings of emissary Scene. We recognize the profound, if challenging, nature of your operational physics and ethical framework. We formally request, under the gravest of circumstances, a unified defense posture against the Cathar hegemony. State your terms for alliance and intervention. The response was instantaneous, confirming the human expectation of this inevitable move. Strategos Xylos, Rostova's voice returned, calm and resolute. Terms for the unified defense are simple and non-negotiable. First, total autonomy for human operational decisions in the designated conflict zone. Second, complete and unfettered access to all Krill sensor data, logistical records, and strategic predictions regarding Cathar behavior. Third, absolutely no deployment of high-yield weapon systems that risk unacceptable collateral damage or widespread long-term disruption of localized space-time integrity. Fourth, upon stabilization of the immediate threat, the Krillithos will commit to a collaborative, shared research initiative focused on developing sustainable, high-efficiency infrastructure based on the principles of localized temporal manipulation. We do not require territory, resources, or political subordination. We require cooperation and responsibility. The conclave erupted into chaos. This was not the demand of a conqueror, but the proposal of a teacher. To surrender their massive, energy-siphoning weapons, the symbols of their power, and to commit to asterisk learning from an upstart species was an unthinkable political humiliation. Vec was apoplectic. They demand we discard our defenses and become their acolytes. This is subjugation disguised as pedagogy. No, Counselor, Xylos countered, his voice booming over the din. It is an invitation to survival. They are not asking for our power. They are demanding our sanity. They are demonstrating, through their actions at the Cygnus Vale, that our power is obsolete. If we adhere to the limitations of their third term, avoiding high-yield disruptors, it is only because they know what catastrophic, unseen consequences such ancient, wasteful weaponry truly causes. They are protecting us from our own technological recklessness. We accept the terms, Ambassador Rostova. The unified defense was a terrifying, asymmetric orchestra of power and subtlety. The Krill fleets, Enormous, heavily shielded vessels were arrayed in their traditional blocking patterns, ready to absorb the blunt kinetic force of the Cathar onslaught. Their role was simple: hold the line and serve as the necessary distraction. The human contribution was almost invisible, a true manifestation of the ghost. Operating from the decentralized nodes of infrastructure like the Ethelred Station Asterisk, and utilizing a fleet of small, functional vessels that defied detection, they began their strategic intervention. The Krill tactical screen displayed the approach of the Cathar primary invasion wave, a terrifying, densely packed collection of armor and weapon systems spanning an immense volume of space. Krill prepared for the inevitable, grinding, sector-by-sector attrition that characterized this eternal conflict. But the grinding never began. The Krill sensor data, now being directly filtered through the human operational network, started showing contradictory readings. Individual Cathar ships, heavily armored cruisers and destroyers, began drifting out of formation. Not destroyed, not disabled by energy fire, but suddenly, catastrophically, directionless. What is the human action? Xylos demanded from the command spire, watching the incomprehensible failure of the Cathar geometry. Rostova was not present in the Krill war room, but her calm voice was relayed directly from Ethelred Asterisk. We are executing Phase 1 of the operational strategy, Strategos. We are not attacking their vessels. We are attacking their data. Their command ships rely on perfect, continuous temporal synchronization and navigational calibration to maintain this density of formation. We are leveraging the ambient gravitational noise of the galactic core to introduce infinitesimally small, nonlinear shifts into their local time dilation fields. These shifts, too small to trigger their defensive alarms, cause their command computers to execute microcorrections based on flawed temporal data. The result is structural stress, navigational errors, and critically, a total inability to coordinate their weapon fire. The human action was not a barrage of plasma. It was a systemic introduction of confusion into the laws of physics governing the Cathar fleet. The immense, seemingly unstoppable invasion wave began to disintegrate, not through explosion, but through internal, self-inflicted chaos. Ships designed for tight formation began scraping hulls, defensive fire went wide, and the core command structure dissolved into localized, panicked skirmishes against imagined enemies. Then the ghost struck in earnest. Small human vessels, undetected by the chaotic Cathar sensors, utilized their microgravitic lensing drives to appear momentarily inside the Cathar fleet's immediate perimeter. They did not fire kinetic weapons. Instead, they deployed compact, specialized devices that locked onto the Cathar primary energy conduits. "What are those devices?" Xylos asked, captivated, watching the sensor readings show surgical, localized power loss. "Those are thermodynamic regulators," Rostova explained. The Cathar vessels generate vast amounts of waste heat, which they dissipate constantly through their outer plating. We are momentarily reversing the localized flow of heat dissipation, overloading their internal thermal regulation systems. The ships are not being destroyed. They are being forced into immediate, non-combat operational shutdown to prevent catastrophic core meltdown. We are weaponizing their own inefficiency against them. In mere cycles, the entire Cathar primary wave, a force that had threatened to conquer the Krill home system, was reduced to a colossal graveyard of disabled, overheating hulks drifting aimlessly in the void. There were no grand explosions, no tactical victories to celebrate with kinetic fanfare, only silence and the chilling evidence of overwhelming conceptual superiority. The ghost had not fought the Cathar. It had simply demonstrated why their method of war was unsustainable. The Cathar, recognizing the total unwinnable nature of the conflict, facing an enemy that refused to use conventional rules of engagement and leveraged the fundamental constants of the universe against them, initiated a widespread, immediate retreat across all fronts. The war, which had ground on for generations, was over. Not with a bang, but with the chilling, total quiet of an opponent forced into self-preservation mode. The immediate crisis was averted, but the atmosphere in the conclave had shifted irrevocably. Fear of annihilation had been replaced by a deep, unsettling reverence. The Krillithos owed its survival to a species they had initially deemed a catastrophic variable. Strategos Xylos initiated the required fourth term of the Alliance, the Collaborative Research Initiative. Krill scientists and logistics masters traveled to the Ethelred Station at the heart of the Ophiuchus Cloud, expecting to find the secrets of propulsion and weapon technology. They found instead a massive, ongoing project that overshadowed the entirety of the recent war. Ambassador Rostova personally guided Xylos and Acolyte Scene through the deeper structural sections of *Ethelred*. You assumed, strategos, that our interest in the Cathar was entirely localized to your conflict, Rostova observed, leading them through chambers filled not with tactical displays, but with immense, complex harmonic resonance dampeners and hypersensitive gravity gradient sensors. We utilized the conflict, yes, as an opportunity to test defensive strategies, but the conflict itself was merely localized noise. Localized noise. Xylos repeated, struggling to reconcile the systemic threat of the Cathar with such a dismissive categorization. Yes, a necessary clearing of the foreground to focus on the background signal, Rostova confirmed, stopping before a central observation port that gazed into the absolute blackness beyond the Ophiuchus cloud, toward the empty intergalactic void. You asked why we are here, in this chaotic, energy-rich environment, at the remote edge of the known galactic arm. We are not primarily here for the resources of the cloud, and certainly not for regional politics. We are here because this environment is the only place we could establish the infrastructure necessary to monitor the storm itself. Scene frowned, looking at the distant, silent blackness. The storm, we referred to the Ophiuchus cloud as the Storm Ambassador. No, Rostova corrected, shaking her head slowly. The cloud is merely a localized meteorological event. True storm is the slow, non-entropic decay field emanating from the intergalactic region designated as the Void of Perun. It is a decay field that violates every law of equilibrium and stability known to the Krillithos and human physics alike. She activated the main display again. It showed the image of the Void of Perun, a region utterly devoid of stellar material, overlaid with complex spectral readings. The lines were jagged, erratic, and profoundly disturbing. For the last 1,000 cycles, humanity has been quietly monitoring this specific decay field. It is not thermal, gravitational, or electromagnetic. It is the slow, systematic degradation of the fundamental constants of the universe in that localized region. Specifically, the strong nuclear force, the fine structure constant, and the fundamental ratio of Planck time are subtly, yet measurably, shifting out of acceptable tolerance. If this decay field reaches the main galactic disk, reality as you and I understand it will simply fail to cohere. Stars will cease to generate light and matter will fail to hold form. The Conclave's crisis, the Cathar War, the very survival of the Krillithos, suddenly shrank to the insignificance of a petty squabble. The humans weren't battling regional empires, they were battling the structural integrity of reality itself. And your ghost movements. The efficiency, the suppression, the localized temporal manipulation, Xylos asked, the realization dawning with crushing clarity. They were necessary mitigations, Rostova explained. Every single instance of high-energy output, such as conventional warp drives, large-scale fusion detonations, or the mass effect shielding used by the Cathar and Krill alike, generates residual localized temporal distortions. Near the Perun void, those distortions exacerbate the primary decay field, speeding up the structural breakdown of reality. We were forced to be efficient, strategos, because inefficiency was literally destabilizing existence. She paused, looking at the stunned Krill leaders. The precision strikes against the Cathar were not just military strategy. They were a systemic intervention to reduce the energy footprint of the conflict zone, preventing further irreversible damage to the cosmic constants near the galactic edge. The ghost in the storm was simply humanity trying to be quiet enough not to wake the true terror and efficient enough to prepare for it. Xylos felt his ancient knowledge base crumble into dust. The Krillithos had survived by conserving political and physical structure. The humans were surviving by conserving the fundamental structure of reality. What is the source of this decay field? Scene whispered, his focus now in tear. Ely on the deep void. Rostova motioned toward the screen again. The erratic lines began to stabilize slightly, filtering out the cosmic noise they had successfully dampened using the harvestable energy of the Ophiuchus cloud. Beneath the decay field readings, a faint, rhythmic pattern began to emerge. It was artificial, structured, and ancient beyond comprehension. We do not know the source, but we have stabilized the readings enough to ascertain a profound signature, Rostova stated. The decay field is not natural. It is the waste product of something unimaginably massive, something that existed at the dawn of the universe, and whose power expenditure is finally reaching a catastrophic level of decay. She isolated the rhythmic pattern and amplified it. It was a signal, buried beneath the noise of cosmic collapse, repeated with the staggering patience of eons. It was not data, not communication, but a resonant warning, a continuous broadcast detailing the engineering parameters of a massive, reality-bending structure that had failed. Warning: parameters of coherence failure imminent. The architects have fallen, seek stability beyond the shifting veil. That strategos xylos is the larger twist, Rostova concluded, her voice gaining intensity. The storm is not just decay, it is the noise of an ancient collapse. Humanity has been here, for decades by your measure, building the infrastructure necessary to interpret this warning and to mitigate the effects of the decay. We were not ignoring your conflict. We were simply preoccupied with trying to hold the cosmos together long enough for everyone to notice the real problem. The implication was immense. Humanity had developed the ghost technology not to fight local wars, but to operate quietly and effectively in the face of universal entropy, using conservation as their ultimate weapon and their ethical rigor as their strategic necessity. They were not conquerors or saviors. They were pragmatic custodians of universal constants. Xylos stood silent, absorbing the revelation. His people had feared the human unpredictability, their silent strikes, their refusal to engage in known protocols. They had feared the ghost because they believed it represented a hidden aggression when in fact the ghost represented profound, necessary restraint. The highest form of power was not the capacity to destroy the universe, but the capacity to preserve it silently without fanfare. "And the future ambassador?" Xylos finally asked, the title now carrying the full weight of recognition. "What is the strategic objective now, given this reality?" Rostova turned back toward the dark void, where the ancient signal pulsed its dire warning. "The Cathar conflict is neutralized. The immediate threats to the Krillithos are eliminated. We have unified the two greatest logistical and intellectual powers of this galactic arm under a shared strategic goal, not through conquest or diplomacy, but through the necessity of survival against a threat that defines the true scale of power." She looked at Xylos and seen a genuine, powerful expression of human determination replacing her previous clinical calm. "The future objective is simple. Utilizing the combined intellectual resources of the Krill ethos and humanity, we must collectively decipher the mechanics of this ancient failure, this collapsed megastructure. We must learn how to repair the fundamental coherence of spacetime in the Perun void, or failing that, develop a unified method for migrating civilization beyond the reach of the shifting veil. The era of localized warfare is over, strategos. The true frontier is defined by the need to stabilize reality itself. We must stop being loud, wasteful entities and become, together, the collective, responsible ghost in the storm." Xylos nodded slowly, the fear finally receding, replaced by a sense of daunting, shared purpose. He realized that humanity, in their capacity for ruthless efficiency and unwavering ethical clarity in the face of extinction-level threats, represented the ultimate, necessary evolution of civilization. They had faced the chaotic destruction of their own internal histories and emerged disciplined by the necessity of conservation. The ghost was not something to be feared. It was the ultimate refined projection of responsibility, cast into the darkness, ready to stabilize the inevitable chaos of the universe. The Krillithos had survived one war only to step onto the stage of an infinitely larger, more profound conflict, a conflict for existence itself, fought not with explosions, but with physics and profound, quiet dedication. They would learn to be quiet. They would learn to be efficient. They would stand with the humans. The grand, silent, terrifying work had just begun.